Hi, I'm Eric Johnson at the Owen Graduate School of Management, and I'm here today with Jeff Schwartz. Jeff is the VP of Insights at GLOAT, and here today speaking at the school. Welcome, Jeff.
I'm really glad to be here, Eric. Thanks.
Well, Jeff, you founded the future work practice at Deloitte and spent a long time really championing that idea inside of Deloitte, writing a couple books, Work Disrupted being the most recent one that's out, but I know you've got one coming. Work Ecosystems is coming soon. So you've been thinking about this for a long time, this topic of work. But now we've been through COVID, 2.5 years of that. What does that mean for reshaping the way we kind of think about the future of work?
Well, first, again, it's great to be here at Owen. And, it's interesting. I wrote my first article on the future of work actually in 2013. So it's almost 10 years. We're very, very close to being 10 years. And I wrote an article at that point on what we were describing as the open talent economy. We were looking at the idea that a big percentage of employees and workers weren't employees anymore. They had all these different contractual forms. Now we know them as freelance workers and gig workers and contract workers and crowd workers and all those pieces. So I've been I've been researching this for 9-10 years. Before that, I was the global leader of the talent practice at Deloitte. And so I wrote a series of articles. I think I wrote about 15 or 18 articles. And then in 2018, 2019, I started pulling my thinking together in what became the book Work Disrupted. And I think this is how I'll summarize what the challenges are we're facing. And I often start when I talk about it, Eric, by referring to a great quote from Albert Einstein. I joke, you can't go wrong if you quote somebody like an Albert Einstein.
Pretty safe.
Right? And what Einstein said was that you can't use an old map to explore a new world. And I think that in many ways encapsulates the challenge that we have today. And the three main changes that we're seeing are changes around work, how work is changing in terms of its focus, both on productivity and innovation and impact. Work is changing as we're looking at all of our work involving people and technology together. Workforces are obviously changing, not only because we're moving to ecosystems, as I just referred to, the open talent economy, but the expectations of workers globally is changing. The nature of our working lives are changing. As Linda Grattan and Andrew Scott remind us, we need to think about 100-year lives and 50, 60-year careers, multi-chapter careers. And then, of course, I don't have to remind any of us that the workplace has changed, right? We've seen that dramatically in the last couple of years. So we need a different map for that. You used to be able to associate the work that we do and the workplace that we have. Teachers taught in schools. Doctors did work in clinics. Factory workers worked in factories. Yeah. Those things, shop workers, retail was done in retail shops. Yeah. We have started to, in many ways, really change the relationship between work and place. And all these things that we're exploring are really mindset shifts and management shifts, which is to me what makes them so interesting.
So what does this mean for the definition of work, I guess, as it were, and for organizations and leaders?
I think the definition of work has changed, right, in a couple of ways, but I'll just focus on one of them. For many, many years in management and business, work itself was very clearly defined. It was highly predictable. It was very stable. We're going back to Frederick Taylor now, in the early 1900s, right? The concepts of scientific management. And in many ways, there are many leaders who are sort of managing and leading on the fumes of scientific management, right? That's not where we are anymore, right? Another way of thinking about it is we used to be able to think of the job as the main unit of analysis, not just for human resource management, for business management. We broke down our business into jobs. Jobs were standard processes that we assigned with a checklist of skills. We could recruit people years in advance because the skills of those jobs were highly predictable. Yeah. We could move people around in clear succession plans.
Fill the boxes
because they were also predictable, right? Yeah. Work is much more dynamic. Jobs are much more dynamic and careers are much more dynamic. And the way I would summarize this is if work and workforces and workplaces have been disrupted, not only moved faster, right? When I reflect on what we're hearing right now, talking to business leaders around the world, is we're in a much different place in 2022 and 2023 than we thought we were going to be in 2019. So sometimes we talk about it in terms of acceleration. I think of it as a shift. I think of it as a disruption, right? We thought we were starting at point A and we're actually starting at point F, right? We're in a very different place than we were. I think the challenge for leaders is to ask themselves, do I have a narrative? Do I have a framework that is relevant for the kind of questions that we have now? Again, around work, workforce, and workplace. How do I think about the relation between my strategy and my workforce? Am I running a 20th century playbook or am I running a 21st century playbook? And really the priority now is having and running 21st century playbooks. And that's where I think all the interesting momentum is right now.
Yeah. Well, we have a set of students that are really interested in the human capital space. And in fact, we just hosted a case competition around strategic human capital and all these kinds of things. And I'm kind of wondering, what are you telling senior HR leaders when they're thinking about this subject?
As you know, I'm a retired senior partner at Deloitte. Deloitte has had a great relationship, both with, I thought, the MBA competition and historically, and also
that's right.
with the school. Having been a partner at Deloitte for 20 years, we have, I have a lot of colleagues who have come through the Owen School in Vanderbilt. So thank you, and thank the school for that. There's that wonderful expression, it's the best of times and the worst of times. I don't think there's anything about it that's the worst of times, right? It is an amazing time to be an HR leader. And we've all heard the tremendous stories and reflections over the last couple of years of how HR leaders really stepped into the most strategic and impactful roles in organizations. And they did that because we were doing at least two things. We're probably doing 10 things, but here were two really big things that HR leaders were doing. And I think there's a third thing we need to do going forward. We focused on the well-being of our employees and our workers, right? At a time when it was absolutely essential for both personal and business and societal reasons to do that. HR showed us how to do that. HR also helped us reconfigure our work and our jobs so that we could actually get the work done that needed to be done during the pandemic, right? In a way, we exposed the potential of the workforce like we've never seen it exposed before.
Yeah.
What became critical during the pandemic, and HR leaders, I think, really led the way on this, was it really didn't matter what skills we thought you had. What mattered was what we needed to do and how people could contribute in new ways, adjacent skills, interesting skills. People basically stepped up, right? The automotive industry going from producing automobiles, a complicated machine with 2,000 parts, to producing ventilators, another machine with 700 parts. There's very little overlap between these two, but the underlying capabilities were very similar, and we could call that out. Obviously, in the healthcare and the life sciences industry, asking the life science industry to create the vaccines and the therapeutics as we did in early 2020, right? Imagine getting a call from the CEO of a pharma company, you're the head of HR, and they say, and you get a call from the head of the therapeutics and vaccine division says, we're all in, we're going to create a vaccine for the coronavirus, send me 1,000 resumes of our employees who know coronavirus, respiratory, mRNA technology.
And by the way, I need it yesterday.
Stat, as we say, right? We didn't have them, right? So we saw the potential of the workforce. We understood well-being, we understood the potential, we understood how to get the work done. I think the challenge that we have, and it's an incredibly exciting challenge, is, and this is what I'm really looking forward to we're talking about today, is how do we reimagine and redesign the work that we do so it actually fits the future patterns and the future interests of both our employees and our workers and the requirements of business and the requirements of customers. So we're moving from a moment of adaptation to a moment of reimagination, right? So we did amazingly well as HR leaders during the moment of adaptation. I think the challenge now is to continue to adapt, continue to nurture in a professional and positive way, but it's this reimagination and redesign priority. That's why Linda Grattan, a colleague of ours at London Business School, just wrote a book on redesigning work in the hybrid world. I think we're going to see a lot of talk about redesigning, reframing, rethinking, think again, as Adam Grant describes it in his book. I think those are the themes of what's coming up next.
Yeah. And we're all busily mapping out 2023 now. What do you see?
So when I think about 2023, my eye is more on 2025 and 2030. Look, we were pinned down by the pandemic, right, in a way that we had to adapt and survive. And we saw an amazing adaptability and agility of the workforce, of society, of our businesses. I think now is the time in 2023, as we're looking towards 2023, to actually put our eyes towards 2025 and 2030. It's what, when I was at Deloitte in our strategy practice, we used to call it zooming out in order to zoom in. To figure out where we want to be in 2023, we need a clear view about where we want to be in 2025. I'll add one perspective to that. For a long time, Eric, we've talked about the accelerating curve of technology, Moore's law. Every couple of years, technology doubles.
Boom, 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 yeah.
And it just keeps on going, right? We can argue about where we are in Moore's law, but it seems to hold pretty well. Here's one way of thinking about that as an HR leader, as a business leader generally. All the change that we saw in the decade from 2010 to 2020, we can expect that amount of change in half the time. So between 2020 and 2025, we have to basically lead and work through all the change of the last decade, right? And between 2025 and 2030, we need to do it again. So we need to go from what happened in the last decade, we need to double it in this 5 years, and we're going to double it again. That's 4x in the next few years. So what does that mean? What does a return to normal mean when you're riding the kind of disruption and the waves that we're talking about? Peter Hinson talks about the never normal, not the new normal,
I
right?
love that.
How do we live in a land of disruption? I think that's the challenge that we have now. So in 2023, the challenge is, what are we doing to prepare to be in the position we want to be in the next couple of years? And one of my favorite phrases of the last year is to change the game. And I think almost every business leader and HR leader is being asked the question, how am I changing the game given what's going on right now? To change the game, you need to make game-changing moves. If you are not making game-changing moves, if you are only doubling down on what you've done traditionally, whether it's in HR or any management discipline, this is my perspective, you're probably not going to be as successful as you would like, right? You need to be looking at these new maps, these new mindsets, the disruptor's mindset, if you will. So what is on your agenda in 2023 that you're going to be proud that you and your CEO and your board put in the annual report in early 2024? What is the game-changing move or moves that you're going to make that you're going to be proud of and say, we did this and our competitors did not? And that's why we're leading and not following the market.
Wow, that's a lot to think about. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for spending the day with us at Vanderbilt.
I'm really excited to be here, and I'm looking forward to the talk this afternoon. Thanks, Eric.